So I'm Anne-Marie Pearman. I am joined today by Christa Campsall. Christa is a teacher of primary, intermediary and secondary school children, and both special educational needs. And she's also written My Guide Inside, which is an educational book and course to help children with their innate mental health. So thank you for joining me, Christa.
Thank you for the invitation, Anne-Marie. I've been a little bit on vacation mode, so this kind of, I've got something in my calendar, so delighted to be here. Thank you.
Lovely to have you. So my first question to you then, Christa, is you met Sid Banks in the mid-70s, I believe, while you were in university. How did that impact your life, and were there any changes to how you lived your life prior to meeting Sid Banks and afterwards? Would you like to talk about that?
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you. So at 8, I was barely 17, and I finished school a little bit early and left my little hometown and went to the big city of Vancouver and started university there. And so at that time, I would, like everyone else, a victim in a sense of my circumstances. Fortunately, often my circumstances were good, and I felt happy, and I was very much into being happy and optimistic, but I didn't have the know-how of how to be happy all the time or more of the time. And so it was a little bit of a yo-yo experience. And at university, I enrolled in a Bachelor of Education program to teach K-12 school in British Columbia. And part of that mandated part of the mandated program was to take psychology, and quite a bit of it, because psychology, of course, lends itself to what we do in special education and so on. Anyway, we'd have these huge lecture halls, all us young people in there learning about psychology, and psychology 101 and then 201, and then certain psychology to do with children and so on. And you just kind of kept getting sicker. Not that I was sick, but I started to see myself as rather sick as we started learning about these things. And I started, those parents of mine, I don't know, and I started judging them and how they treated me, et cetera, et cetera. And you just started to feel like, wow, I really need counseling. And so the counseling offices were packed with all these young people learning about the psychology of the day. And then as I started my teaching practicums, where you're supervised and you kind of try out your skills as a student teacher, I realized that I had a good skill set. University of British Columbia is wonderful, really state-of-the-art learning that we had. And I found that kids who were on a learning path was fine. It was great. I could really connect with them and help them and inspire them, etc. But kids who were shut down or acting out or belligerent or having issues, I could not, for the life of me, connect with them. So I actually thought, well, maybe it's me, maybe it's my issue. And so I actually took a year off my program and went to Europe and had a wonderful time, went to university there in Freiburg and traveled around with people I met. It was wonderful. And then when I came back to Vancouver, I thought, well, I'll try it just once more and see. But I started to think of other professions maybe that I might be better suited for. So I came back. Now I've just had my 21st birthday, 1975, and came back to Vancouver. And I knew Bob Campsall. He's my husband now, but back then we were good friends, and we met in high school. And he invited me to the Gulf Islands, where he was house sitting. And in the year that I'd been away, Europe at the time was much more conservative and formal than America was. So I came back a little bit more formal, and in the year away, he was a bit more like a hippie. So we were quite a funny looking pair, me in my formal, European clothes, him in his dungarees and ripped jeans and so on. But we really enjoyed each other's company, and we both really loved being happy. But in that visit, I realized that Bob actually was he was really on an active search, a little bit more, as many young people were then and now, to find more meaning to life. And so he was ready to join something and kind of leave the mainstream of society. And I thought, well, wow. That's certainly not for me. And I left that island. I still remember kind of leaning on the ferry railing and thinking, well, that's the end of that friendship. I got to make some new friends at university this fall. So while Bob was house sitting, this house was next door to Chip and Jan Chipman. And Bob became very good friends with both of them, but he and Chip would often just philosophize about life. And Chip was also, looking for a deeper meaning to life. And Jan actually met Sid Banks, and then Chip began to hear the message. And so Chip would say to Bob, they had a beautiful philosophical discussion, Bob describes, and Bob could see that there was a real definite change in his friend and neighbor, and he was very intrigued, and he was like, wow, right next door on Salt Spring Island, there's this man with all this knowledge, like, wow. So Chip said he's holding his first public talk in a few weeks, whatever it was, you should go. And so Bob did go to the neighboring island and heard Sid speak. And right then and there, he knew that the answer was within and that his search was over. He just knew it. He was so transformed by the experience of listening to what Sid shared. And so this is like a Saturday night, whatever. He wakes up the next morning, the feeling is still with him. Wakes up the next morning, the feeling is still with him. He's found a new lease on life, so to speak. And so being a good friend, he thought of me, and he came over to Vancouver to tell me that he'd found the secret to life. So yeah, surprised, A, to see him, B, that he's got the secret to life. I'm like skeptical, right? But so he had this beautiful feeling about him. It was definitely a newfound feeling. And he shared with me that what he'd heard. And what he heard was that happiness is within. And I'm like, yep, like the sound of that. And also he heard that thought creates reality. And I put up a good argument against that, because I truly believed it was circumstance that created my reality. So, like young people do, we philosophized and hung out for a few days, whatever. And despite my arguing, I couldn't deny this beautiful feeling. It was kind of like invigorated yet calm, but it was new. And I really liked that. And, when you're 21, you're still shaping your philosophy. And I couldn't help but just try this on for size. What's going on with my thought, and what am I seeing in the world? And I started to realize that absolutely there was a direct correlation. And with this realization, I'll call it, tons of negative, unnecessary thinking fell away. And all of a sudden I was experiencing like this, a newfound feeling myself. So I found when I went in to do my next practicum, my head was not filled with analysis and judgment and so on and so on. And there's some of that, but it wasn't filled with that. And I found I was, wow, with this clear mind, I was actually able to connect with kids who were either belligerent or on the other end of the scale, really shut down with their head down. So the impact for me was incredible, from like also searching for happiness, even though I wouldn't have probably admitted it because I wasn't going to go off and join anything, to realizing that happiness was within, and understanding just the tiniest little bit about the power of thought had a tremendous impact on me personally. And then also as I was studying to be a teacher. And so it definitely remapped my life when I heard about the truth that was being shared newly by Sid. Yeah.
And earlier you talked about K-12. Can you explain what K-12 is? Just because I think that might be a Canadian expression. I haven't heard it over here.
Right. K being kindergarten. Here we have our public school system. We do support preschool kids, but it's more like parents bring their children and parents have to stay, or a caregiver stays, and there's a little bit of song and a little bit of pre-literacy. But the official public school, which is, the free education, starts in kindergarten and it goes right through grade 12. So kindergarten, you're typically 5 years old, and then you typically graduate grade 12 with a diploma. And then with that diploma, you can go on to either university or trade school or technical school, or, you're ready to actually go into the workforce if you choose. So it's like 5 years old to 18 years old, K to 12.
Thank you for that clarification. So how did it impact you when you're teaching in schools? I know you came up with the My Guide Inside. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, actually, Anne-Marie, this is my third curriculum, so I could give a little bit of history even.
No, that would be great. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I did, when I got my first teaching contract and went in, and we didn't have any materials or anything. There were a few little audio recordings of Sydney Banks, but they weren't for children. And we didn't have any written materials. Sid hadn't written any books yet or anything like that. And so you just used what you knew. And I was really impacted by the results as I worked with these kids. And of course, you say a little bit of truth here and there, common sense and what makes sense to say, but mostly it's just that feeling and seeing the health in the students despite whatever behavior. And so I started to see how seeing students as whole and beautiful, if you will, really calmed them. And as they became calm, they began to trust you. And then you were able to educate or draw out their own innate health. And then they were on a new trajectory and created a learning path. And also kids that had difficult pasts, and you might say had very good reason to be belligerent and against society, as they started to gain a sense of who and what they really are, they were able to rewrite their past in a sense, and they started to look back at their history and start to see beautiful things that had happened, and those became the memories that they carried forward. So that was really a beautiful thing to see. And I saw it my first contract, my first year teaching, and I saw it many, many times. I have a long career of teaching. I saw it repeated again and again. Also, the other beautiful thing is kids who were feeling okay and who had a strong desire to learn and, engage with the curriculum and so on, really learned, and I still have some of these cards from kids. They really learned, they claim through my modeling, how to be with people who are struggling. And so that is also a huge benefit in a classroom. If we're all working together and we all kind of can move forward to having a joyful, creative environment, it's really, so I found, wow, these principles, there's something there for everyone, no matter if you're already doing okay, or if you're struggling, or if you're shut down, whatever it is. So I found it was tremendously impactful. At the time, this is like now, I'm fast forwarding to like the very early 1990s, and by now, Chip and Jan are very close friends, and Ken and Elsie, they were living in Florida. We were in Vancouver, and there was a young man in Florida who was really interested in 3 principles and education, and he had a grant to write a curriculum, and I got to know him and then ended up co-authoring some of the versions. So we started with something called Self-Esteem is for Everyone in the early 1990s. And of course, we didn't have the tech that we do now to spread it far and wide, but it was a very successful curriculum. And I piloted it here on Salt Spring. And again, we were just astounded by the impact that teaching youth about their inner selves and about the power of thought, that just the impact it has on every domain of their lives. So that was the first curriculum. And what we did with the pilot here, which was pretty brave looking back, the colleague who invited me to be part of it, he was the head of special education at the high school at the time. And so he created these classes. He was like, if anybody's having any issue at all, send them to this class. And we had so many referrals that we created 2 family grouping classes. So we had kids from like 14 to 18 in these family settings and taught them through the principles through the Self-Esteem is for Everyone. So that was fabulous. He used it in Florida. People bought it throughout the States and so on. I used it here. And then when I did my Master of Arts degree in 2004 or 5, something like that, I created another curriculum just for my research and thesis. And I called it Leadership and Learning. And I did, the qualitative and quantitative studies using that material. And then all this time I'm teaching, classroom teacher, different levels, sometimes younger kids, sometimes middle, sometimes high school. And then I upgraded to special education degree, mainly for job security, because we're on an island and the student population goes up and down. So if you have a specialty, it's more job security. Also, it was really an opportunity to see what can the 3 principles do with any special needs designation. And so for 10, 12 years, I worked in special education at all levels, primary, intermediate, and about the last 10 years was at the high school level. And that was really very, very rewarding work to work with. So you have to support the teachers to understand the students with special needs, support the students, of course. And as you know, special needs can be developmental, it can be chronic health, it can be mental illness issues, it can be behavior issues. It just is the umbrella for any issue a student may face. And also, when you're in special education, you get a bit more time with the families, working closely with the families. So it was incredible to see how the principles can impact everyone. The student, the teacher, the education assistants, and of course the family and caregivers as well. So in 2014 or so, I was invited by the 3 Principles Global Community to come down to Minneapolis and be part of a plenary, because folks wanted to hear about the old days on Salt Spring, the old days. So Elsie spoke, Chip and Jan spoke, and I spoke, and we had a little panel that was the start of the conference. And then I did a little breakout on education. And I loved that so much. That was back in the day when we actually used to get together. But I loved it so much. I came home and I realized that it was time to retire from public school and just be more in service to the global community. And so I kind of looked around, and Kathy Marshall Emerson, the founding director of National Resilience Resource Center, who I knew a little bit because of our common interest in 3 principles and education. On her website, she had a global call for K-12 curriculum. And because she'd been working for decades with US government grants, working with teachers, and they were always like, where's the curriculum? If we had a curriculum, we'd, use it on Monday morning kind of thing. And so she put out this global call. And so I thought about it, the pros and cons, and it's really about the feeling, do we need a curriculum? But I found good reasons why a curriculum could be valuable. And so I contacted Kathy and I said, I'm really into it. I'd love to do it. So it's my 3rd one. And I'm proud and happy to say that Kathy, who has tremendous experience working with teachers, and mine is more right within the system. She was with me right from step 1, and we still collaborate today. In fact, last weekend, we did a 3-year, she did a 3-year follow-up with students that graduated 3 years ago that learned from the My Guidance Side curriculum when it was kind of like hot off the press. And we were just so touched to see how this knowledge, once you're introduced to it, it's yours to use, and how it becomes part of how you live and how you see the world and interact with the world, and how they just naturally seek kindness and compassion for themselves and for others. So we're really going to be thrilled to publish that once we, add the front and end titles and so on. And so people can see, because we did a focus group 3 years ago with what they learned right at the end of the course. They got high school credit for it. And now 3 years later, what they still own as their own knowledge.
Did you have any resistance when you first started using My Guidance Side? Did you have any resistance from the schools at all, or were they all open to it?
The schools, I was really very fortunate. I have a long career here, like I've said, and a colleague had a position called Connecting Generations, which was basically writing grants and doing other things, literally connecting generations. And she very successfully wrote grants so that we could implement these pilots in the schools around here. And then another grant, which allowed for to spend time with the teachers, and also funds to buy the books for the students. So, but I will say resistance, well, I was resistant. I was like arguing, it's my circumstance that creates my reality. You don't know what you're talking about. That's not true. And I don't know if this is entirely 100%, but I'll say generally speaking, those who've had traditional psychology counseling kind of put up the biggest argument. Because they're like, no, I've learned it's, X, Y, Z out there. But it's so interesting. What we do, Anne-Marie, is teach, educate, draw out through stories. And at this secondary level for the teenagers, those are all true stories of my students and some of the Jane Tucker stories, students as well. So through these true stories, the kids kind of start to see the logic for someone else. And it's very kind of a cool way for them to kind of, well, that makes sense. Is it true for me? And then they start to see, yeah, it's true for me too, despite whatever has gone on before in my life, whatever difficulties I've been facing. This is true for me also. And they start to find a sense of their own human dignity. In the past, teenagers would see themselves as, they called themselves damaged goods. It's not, that term's not used so much anymore, but that same idea that if you've had a rough go and had some difficult circumstances, that you were less than in some way. And through these stories and the truth and the beauty of the principles, they start to see that indeed, as Dr. Pettit says, nothing broken, never broken, nothing lacking, however he puts that. They start to see that for themselves. And then once you've connected with your inner health, mental health, you know how to tap into that and help yourself as needed. So yes, there's resistance from some students for sure at the beginning.
And is My Guidance Guide, is it just used within schools, or if somebody wanted to buy My Guidance Guide as a book, for example, is that available outside of the school system, or is it just within schools?
The primary intention is definitely for school classrooms. I've designed it so that a teacher can easily give credit for language arts, health, career. There's a course in England, PSHE. It kind of fits with that. What is PSHE? Something social health education. Anyway, that's a standard course in the UK. So it's primarily designed for school classrooms and for reporting on, for report cards, giving school credit. We have a teacher's manual for each of the books. And in the teacher's manual, we lay the foundation of the pedagogy and the research that's already established. And then we have the lesson plans and connect the learning objectives to the objectives that we need to meet as teachers. And then also references and assessment materials that teachers can find valuable. However, Dr. Pettit wrote the foreword to the books, which is fabulous. And he pointed out to me that, largely due to the pandemic, that these books are really valuable even for parents to use. Parents were looking for materials. Also, counselors, or if someone is in psychiatry treatment, that so professionals in those helping areas were finding them really useful as well. Obviously, they don't need the assessment or evaluation materials, but the stories and the open-ended questions and even some of the art activities are very relevant and meaningful. Yes. And then due to the pandemic, I created with some wonderful people to help me video on demand. So a learner can, you buy one book, you get the password for the video on demand, and there I am with some really nice people, and we read the story out loud and we discuss things a little bit and go over a little bit of the vocabulary. So someone can actually, a kid of any age can independently view these and, ponder and reflect on the open-ended questions, which are designed to draw out your wisdom. It's always all designed to draw out what's inside you. So yeah, really, really for anyone. They're widely available worldwide on Amazon. And then last fall, to make it even simpler, I put them all on Kindle as well.
I do love a good Kindle.
Yeah. Oh, and then Anne-Marie, it was quite remarkable to me, thanks to largely to Dr. Pettit talking about these books, but people started to approach me, and I'm like, wow, this is incredible. So we have 7 translations. Is that kind of astounding? Let me see if I can get this right. Yeah. I took care of the French and Spanish myself, thinking French for Canada and Spanish for the US. And then I was approached, and we have in process, the first one that will be published is German. So we have German, Hebrew, no, Portuguese is already done. German, Hebrew, Portuguese, Romanian, Italian. So, and Swedish on the horizon. So it's just kind of amazing with worldwide access to each other, a true global community. People find me, and I'm like thrilled to, everyone is organically a little bit different how we're going to publish it. But we're just thrilled. And what I want to say about that is we're finding that the stories translate anywhere in the world. I've just give them permission, the translators. I say, change the names to names that are common in your area of the characters in the stories, and everything else we leave the same, which I think is remarkable.
That sounds amazing. So you're truly international now.
Yes, from our little island. It's so fun.
Pete, have you got anything you'd like to ask Christa?
Yeah, Christa, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. I remember last year you came onto I can't remember, it was our VIP course with Mama J, Beyond Recovery. But you were saying about some really younger targeted books as well. Is that based around the same sort of curriculum, is it?
Yes. Thank you, Peter. Nice to see you again, by the way. Yes, I was, I did 2 webinars for Beyond Recovery, Wisdom Entrepreneurs. And that's where I met you. And then I looked for you, and that's where I saw your interview with Anne-Marie, which I loved. So we also have a picture book, which is kind of supplements the curriculum, but being a teacher, I created activities for language and art and games, and those are on the website. You know, you buy the book and you just get the passcode, and you can do any or all of those activities to extend the learning and extend the ownership of it. It's always about, let's show them what they have inside, so they know, of course, we need each other. No person is an island, but to know they have the resources within to make wise decisions, and that they're deserving of a happy life with dignity. So yeah, it's really cute. Do I have one here? It's big pile of books. Just let me find one. Oh, here. Well, this will do. The Italian version. Isn't that adorable? La Guida Perfetta. And it is a classic picture book with pictures on every page. And again, it's through beautiful little, a poem that co-author Jane Tucker created. And we're showing how animals have wisdom within, and then we extend it to, children have wisdom within, and the word love is in there, of course. So thank you, Peter. Yeah, that was really, really fun to add that as a supplementary book. And that, again, is, they're worldwide, either as paperback or as Kindle.
Well, I've got a new granddaughter, so I'm going to be investing in
Oh, congratulations. Oh, and it's surprising, Peter, how young children love books. They can, you have to hold it for them because their little hands don't work yet, but they, that's so awesome. Awesome.
I think she's only 10 weeks. But
oh my gosh.
Already we've got her looking at books and stuff. So
yeah.
You can order them. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think, and what I love about these books is, you know, you enjoy it together. And then wherever the child, once they start talking, wherever they want to pause, that you just really get into it with them, whatever's on their mind, and really help them see the truth of what. And of course, we know that children come out with such gems of truth. Oh, I'm so delighted. I hope she lives relatively nearby, Peter.
She actually lives with me, so.
Oh, well, just down the hall.
Yep. It's fantastic.
That's fantastic.
Amazing. So
amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure.
Oh, that's lovely, Christa. Really nice conversation. Have you got anything else you'd like to ask Peter, or is that it for the moment, do you think?
No, I can't stop grinning. My face is hurting. I'm grinning so much.
This has got this amazing effect that we're all sort of like glowing with happiness now. So anyway, unless there's anything else, I think that was a lovely session with you, Christa, and look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Anne-Marie. I really enjoyed it. I've watched a few of your videos and really appreciate you doing this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was lovely meeting you.
Thank you, Christa. Take care.
Bye-bye.
See you again. Bye.
See you again, Anne-Marie.
Bye.